Do we have anyone on the phone? All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Today is October 27, 2023. This is the second work session on the Municipality of Anchorage 2024 proposed budget, general government, operating, capital, et cetera, utilities and enterprises, ACDA work session. So go ahead and do introductions. Mr. Walland.
Happy to be here.
Scott Myers.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Cont'd.
Felix Rivera.
Kevin Cross.
So we have several members who will be popping in. They're in the building. They're just not in the room. I imagine they'll be here soon. And so we have a presentation before us. Why don't you go ahead and take it over, Ms. Bonzoff? Mr. Johnson just walked in.
Thank you, Chair Constant. This work session is the second of two work sessions for the Mayor's 2024 proposed budget. The first work session was held on October 13th and included an overview of the budget processes, an overview of the general government budget, and details of multiple general government department budgets. Administration and department staff and I are here to answer questions as they come up, and as per our normal process, we will take note of and provide follow-up responses to questions unanswered here. This work session will start with a brief overview of the general government budget changes. We will then present the remaining general government departments and will also present the utility and enterprise departments and ACDA budgets with the directors available for answers. We have one scheduled break and may take additional breaks if requested. This chart was shown at the October 13th work session and shows the main changes from the total general government 2023 revised budget to the 2024 proposed budget. The operating budgets start with developing continuation, keeping this year's programs at the proposed budget year costs. To do this, 2023 one-time requirements were reversed. There was a net zero movement of non-labor to debt service to be in compliance with Governmental Accounting Standard Board's statement number 87 for leases. Debt service is adjusted in accordance with scheduled debt that was approved for previous projects. And then there's a labor continuation, which is usually the largest chunk of the continuation. Labor budget is comprised of positions budgeted at grades and the steps that they would be added in the budget year. If the positions are filled, the budget includes any employee-based status such as service recognition, performance pay, certificates, and education. The salary schedules for the approved collective bargaining agreements for the budget year are applied to the positions. Medical benefit costs and other benefit cost assumptions for the budget year are also included in this calculation. And then other continuation items may include contractual changes, including the calculated room tax cost impacts. This activity then gets us to the continuation budget. The mayor's proposed changes that you will see in the departments presented today include labor savings due to anticipated vacancies. This is a line item budget not associated with specific positions. It is budgeted as one time with the consideration that the positions will continue to be recruited for in the hopes of filling them. And additionally, there are some reductions to non-labor budgets. The 2024 proposed budget is about $2.4 million less than the 2023 revised general government operating budget. We'll first start with the municipal manager. Now we're on to the departments. We'll start with the municipal manager's office, their department. It's comprised of multiple divisions. Starting with the 2023 revised budget, it has the same type of continuation changes that we described, one-time reversals from 23, some debt service, adjustments in line with the schedules, and then salaries and benefits adjustments in line with the CBAs, and then also room tax in accordance with the contractual room tax schedule. Then that gets us to continuation. For the proposed budget, the municipal manager's office has about $100,000 in reductions, half of which are savings for vacancies, as one-time items, and then proposed budget changes for non-labor of about 50,000. The next department we'll go into, unless there's, excuse me,
Mr. Rivera.
okay?
Thanks. Since Ms. Zalato isn't here, I'll go ahead and ask her question, which is vacancies. Are there any vacancies in the municipal manager's office?
I do not have that information at this time.
Thanks.
Or, excuse me.
Hi, Colby Hickle. We do have one vacancy that is budgeted, and we are, in order to obtain these savings, we have decided not to fill that position for about 7 pay periods. It is an old position that one of our special assistants filled previously.
Is that it? All right. Thank you, Ms. Bonzoff. Go ahead. You know, it might be
Excuse me, I'm in this department as well,
the manager.
and I have vacancies, yes.
Okay, so why don't you come on up, and that's great. We definitely want to know that information. I think maybe it would be beneficial briefly to describe to the new members, especially why in the world the municipal manager's budget is $32 million, because it doesn't look like it should be when you think about the manager and the function. So I think a lot of people don't really know. So could you take maybe 3 minutes to describe the organization, how it works?
Sure. So the municipal manager's office also includes the risk department, and that's where a large portion of our budget comes from with our insurance and workers' comp. And Tracy can allude to that more closely, but also within the municipal manager, we have Office of Emergency Management, and we have Renee Stewart's is the Cultural and Entertainments venue. So that's the Denina Center, the Egan Center, and some of the entertainment stuff. And then we also have safeties incorporated in the municipal manager's office. Did I miss anyone? Oh, transportation inspection as well.
So cabs. So, and where are the majority of the 85 positions?
You know, I don't know the breakdown of the majority of the
That's okay.
positions
Sorry,
in
it's
the
off.
department.
It's kind of a 10. Oh, I'm sorry. I flipped the
Mostly
page. 20 positions. Sorry. Okay. Very good. Fair enough. So why don't we briefly hear from OEM?
Hi, we have 6 positions in our division. We are recruiting for one of those positions right now. And the admin position is being filled with an intern. So we have 2 of those 6 positions that are vacant, and we are filling them.
Got that, Mr. Rivera? Yep. All right. Thank you. That's very helpful information. So anything else? Any other questions? I think then we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Continue on to the next department. Have the information technology department, same structure of presentation, service adjustments in line with debt service schedules, salaries and benefits adjustments according to the projected CBAs, including 3 increased positions from non-labor reductions, and then a depreciation adjustment. For IT, the proposed budget includes a $900,000 one-time savings due to vacant positions. And then also for IT, the operating budget for IT includes depreciation, but depreciation is not appropriate. The reduction from the budget of depreciation to get to the appropriation that you'll see on the ordinance.
Ms. Brawley.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. First, vacancy rate, if known. I don't see the acting IT director here. Oh, okay.
You do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know.
Our vacancy rate currently is.
Can you hit the button? There you
Oh,
go.
sorry. Just our current vacancy rate is currently 13.6%. We have 12 out of 88 positions currently vacant. Next year, we anticipate 2 retirements, and we have 1 potential at-risk employee, so it's going to increase next year.
I note that Ms. Bronga joined us. Go ahead, Ms. Barley.
Yeah, thank you. And then second question, why, because, so I noticed that the 900,000 or $923,000, that's the largest of any department, basically savings from vacancies. And what I heard is 2 retirements, which doesn't seem to add up to that much. So I'm just wondering why is that one the largest, and what does that include?
Through the chair, I would like to defer to the OMB department to answer that question.
Sorry. The answer is, the question is, why is it the largest? Sorry. It is a one-time, so what makes it up again is it's a line item adjustment that isn't associated with any specific positions.
But it has to be associated with some positions. What positions aren't filled or are going to be removed? Or are you asking for blanket permission to just cut positions without any notification? What's the mechanics of that number? So sorry, I know you're coughing. I don't want to put you on the spot, but that was, I think, the nature of the question more than. Go ahead.
So if I may, of the 12 positions, 6 have been vacant for about a year, but 6 of those have been vacant for more than a year. We're having challenges hiring people, and I believe that was probably taken into account when this one-time reduction was made. Odds of us being able to fill all 12 positions, much less the 15 that we anticipate for 2024, are approximately 0.
To that is, what services are those positions intending to deliver? Like, what are those positions? What functions are we shortchanged or missing out on in our IT department?
Sure. Let me give you a quick breakdown. So currently the IT director position is vacant. The director's administrative officer position is vacant. In direct services, which is service desk, help desk, we have 1 desktop analyst position vacant. In the ERP Technology Center, which is SAP support, we currently have 3 positions vacant. 1 is an SAP training lead. The second is the ERP Philo functional analyst, and a Philo technical analyst. Both of those last 2 are primarily for supporting the finance department, but they would support all of the Muni, but finance being our primary customer for
Can I
finance
ask you
and
to repeat? I
logistics.
somehow missed it. I dropped off at ERP Tech 3 positions. Then you went to.
Sorry, those 3 positions I listed were all under SAP. So
Right, and then
the
after
SAP
that-
training lead, ERP Philo functional analyst, and the acronym Philo just stands for finance and logistics.
No,
Which,
I see. Those were all under ERP. Okay, thanks.
and then the third was the Philo technical analyst.
So that's 3, 4, 5, 6 positions, which include the director and the admin officer. I can't imagine at least longer than 8 months we won't have an IT director. Are we not recruiting for an IT director?
That's
Sorry to take your questions over, but
I do not have an answer to that question because I'm not involved in that.
okay, here's a question. Maybe it's for OMB. Are we budgeting to remove the funds for the position of the director?
No,
Okay,
if I may.
yeah, please.
Again, vacancy factor is not associated with specific positions with the expectation that specific positions will be vacant. It is a anticipated adjustment to the budget with the expectation that not all positions that are budgeted will be filled all year.
Okay, so I still have, I think, Ms. Brawl, you had third question.
Yeah, it was, so I appreciate the context for vacancies. My other question was just, can you briefly explain the depreciation So I know the concept of depreciation. I guess is that something that's typically in an operating budget, or is that because it's usually a capital? I guess maybe just explain what that is and why it's so large in this particular department.
So depreciation is the post, so depreciate. Sorry. Depreciation is an accounting entry to post to the books when a capital project becomes in use. So it spreads the cost of a capital asset over the time it's in use. The reason why while you see it featured in IT department, and then also when we get to the enterprise and utilities departments, is that these departments are accounted for using the full accrual accounting methodology. IT has a large amount of depreciation because they have had some large capital assets. The majority of the depreciation that is presented in IT is for the SAP project that was about $80 million.
So it's just to be clear, it's not a $9 million cut to the department. It's really an accounting function that we don't see in every department, but we see in this one.
Correct. And if I may quote a director at one time, at a previous work session, he explained it as accounting mumbo jumbo.
Yeah. And that
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
is an official term.
Okay, thanks. That's my question.
So I have myself in the queue then, Ms. Alatel. So on the next page on the list of projects, there is a $3 million SAP migration with the source being other. What's the source?
My apologies, as the acting director, I can't answer that question, but I can get you that answer following this meeting.
I think Marilyn probably knows.
Thank you. And this is more,
Management budget. Yep.
well, so are we done with the IT operating?
I think there are questions. Okay,
I apologize, so I'll go.
I can wait. Go ahead. It's pretty straightforward. Go ahead, Ms. Alatel.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess I'm just going to make this statement now because this is the one that's up and it's the largest savings due to vacant positions. I think the rationale for these savings due to vacant positions is nonsensical and will hurt us in 2025. Any cuts we make in 2024 will exist in 2025, meaning the money to do these positions for a year, for 12 months, will not exist when we are ready to move forward in 2025, and directly contravenes the Assembly's priority as passed in its resolution on employee retention and recruitment. And being competitive. The only way that you would be able to take these is you would have to take these salaries, reduce them or reduce positions or leave some intentionally vacant in order to have anyone possibly apply for these jobs in 2025. And this one in particular is worth noting because this is a lot of vacancies. This is a lot of what makes the municipality go in quite a literal sense. I don't know what day I intersect with the municipality and technology isn't a part of it, often to my own frustration. But so I'm planning, just so everyone's clear, to bring a budget amendment that just reverses all of these across the board because I've not heard a good rationale yet. So I guess that's just some foreshadowing for the administration that if there is one that has a different rationale than the rationale we've heard to date, please point it out, even if we aren't asking. But otherwise, it seems like this is just going to hurt us in 2025 fairly significantly. Thank you.
So, yeah, go ahead, Ms. Cross.
And so that would be a direct question for the IT director. Okay, you said you have 88 positions, 12 vacancies, expecting 15, but this doesn't speak to efficiencies in work, dealing with less arduous problems with, I know that SAP was a nightmare for many years. I guess ideally, you have as many people as you want, but maybe what is the necessary level that we need? If there's a reduction of 6 positions, meaning that you're still going after, you get 6 for 1 year, 6 more for more than over a year. If we had just assumed some of these positions just won't get filled under your current workload and what's happening, are we manageable?
That's a complex question. I'm going to try to give a fairly simple answer to, and that is what doesn't appear here is that you're correct. Many of these positions are critical, and to provide the necessary functionality to the Muni, we often have to turn to staff augmentation through third parties and contractors.
Right. And so as we turn to third-party contractors, typically that's ideal only if they're one-time, like you have a specific project, and it's easier to find a third-party contractor to handle one specific object. That way you don't have somebody that's on year after year that may not necessitate the workload. You're saying that some of those positions that we're regretfully eliminating are positions that are needed continually or just occasionally?
Well, I think to be clear, and I'll let Ms. Bonzoff speak to this if she wants to. My understanding is we're not eliminating those positions. We're just increasing the vacancy factor for one fiscal year for 2024.
Okay.
I don't fully understand all the other ramifications because I'm just the acting director. My understanding from discussions with Mr. Kohlhaas, the city manager, is that as Ms. Bonzoff stated earlier, we will continue to recruit for those positions. And if we're successful in our recruiting efforts, particularly early in 2024, we will have an opportunity to address this through first quarter budget revision requests.
Okay, but the likelihood of finding 15 people by January is unlikely.
It's not great, and the likelihood of finding 15 by the end of 2024 is honestly not much higher. Some of these positions, particularly, I didn't get through the full list, and I'm wondering, can I submit this? Because I know you'd wanted to see a complete list. We didn't get through all of them, so I'll leave this for the assembly. Some of the positions, particularly the SAP positions and the infrastructure positions, are difficult positions to fill in Alaska. They're often very specialized knowledge and experience. And as the only SAP customer in Alaska, it's difficult for us to hire people locally. Now, of course, there are other SAP companies. Most of the oil companies use SAP, but their headquarters for SAP operations aren't here.
And just in closing, yeah, I agree that when you listed those, my red flag was finding and filling somebody to provide SAP training is probably one of the more difficult because they have to have specialized knowledge about SAP. So they either happen internally from someone who's gone through the hard knocks or recruiting externally, which is going to be an out-of-state recruit. So thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. I guess not to keep beating this horse, but we point out the fact that this money is not going to come back, if we make these cuts this year. So why didn't we just have a conversation about just eliminating the positions, right? If we want to save $923,000 in labor costs, we're not going to have that money in 2025. So if we're actually talking about, long-term fiscal responsibility, rather than kind of using the sort of smoke and mirrors things of saying they're one-time savings, but, we're still going to recruit for these positions, but we don't have a plan to pay for them. I'm just curious, did the administration actually look at making real cuts to personnel costs, on a permanent basis to where we would have a sustainable budget that would take us beyond 2024?
The direction from the mayor was a 0, -2 and -4%. So we relied on the directors to make suggestions to the administration. If they wanted to make permanent cuts, they were allowed to. So we allowed, especially, in regards to the IT department, Philippe brought forward his 4% reduction. And no, there was no discussion that I'm aware of to permanently remove any positions for 2025 that I was a part of.
Is there a plan for how we're going to pay for those positions in 2025? Because we're digging a pretty deep hole here.
We'll have to get back to you on that one.
I have myself in the queue. I think it's called voodoo economics. Tax cuts will pay for government. I think we're in that situation here. So I have a question for the acting IT. It's a little hard for you to answer. Next year, when you can't budget these positions that you aren't filling this year, what positions are viable to cut so that you can fund these positions? What are you preparing for in 25 to eliminate to pay for these positions that you know you need but can't fill right now?
And apologies, but I do not have an answer for that. I would have to get you that answer when Mr. Bryce returns.
Right. So then one last question on that before we pivot to the next one, unless other members have questions. So we are operating with at least 12% reduction in staff. We haven't yet had a briefing on what happened last weekend with our email and IT system, where I received like 5,000 emails, where I was receiving confidential emails from other departments, where I was able to just click the button and see the internal communications of other departments. I recognize that IT problems happen. And in fact, IT problems probably happen more when you have a 12% vacancy rate. And so what happened? And just briefly, because obviously this is indirectly germane, but it does have a point.
We did complete an incident report on that, and I would have to defer to the city manager to provide that to the assembly.
All right. So I'll just put a pin on that. I would like that report, minus any, if there are any security sensitive elements that need to be blacked out or redacted. Bottom line is our IT infrastructure is ailing right now, and the proposal is to cut $1 million from their budget. And that $1 million will become permanent next year. And then they will have to decide which positions to cut next year to keep the ones that are critical. So it's just kind of that death spiral conversation come back to life. Anyone else on the operating side? No, Ms. Bronco. Okay.
So SAP is difficult to hire here in Anchorage. Is there a possibility, have you talked of remote work? Someone who is familiar with SAP in the lower 48?
Yes, we have had those discussions, and they're ongoing. I will say that we do use some SAP contractors in there almost completely outside of Alaska. In fact, we don't have any current Alaska-based contractors. But we are operating with a bare minimum, the absolute minimum we can get away with for contractors. We're using as few as possible.
All right, Ms. Alto.
Thank you. Are those positions AMEA positions?
No, they're not.
Are they just non-represented positions?
Yes, they're just straight non-rep.
Okay. Yeah, it would be good to take a closer look at what might make those positions more attractive. So I know it's the exact opposite of what you were asked to do by the administration, which is cut, but we are interested in recruitment and retention, and we've made that really clear. So if there's something we can do to help, I think we're interested in that, particularly since SAP literally sits at the, it's kind of at the heart of the municipality and how it runs. Thank you.
Perfect segue to the question of what are we proposing in the other category to fund the $3 million SAP migration to S/4HANA.
So we're continuing to the capital. Thank you. So for the capital budget, the IT capital is funded initially with debt service, the master tax lease. You'll probably see the debt service requests come through. Sorry. You'll probably, you do see the request for all debt to go through to the assembly, and the debt for the capital projects worked by IT is called the master tax lease. So you'll see those assembly documents come through requesting that we get into debt for those projects. What happens with the recovery of that debt, So in the operating budget for IT, what you'll see is the interest expense for that debt service. The principal is paid on a balance sheet. Once the capital, so that payment of the debt continues based on the debt schedules. Once the capital asset goes into service, it then gets depreciated. And then that depreciation gets budgeted. Does not get appropriated though, but it gets budgeted. And once it's included in the budget, then it gets allocated out to the end users, police department, whomever benefits in the end service area that benefits from that asset. And that's how the actual recovery and costs occurs for the majority of IT capital projects. So you won't see the recovery for this until it goes into service.
So it would be great to have a table of all the master tax lease debts that we have accrued, that we have incurred, that we're paying on. It's like an invisible balance sheet that you can't see, but I think the thrust of what I heard was that we're going to debt finance this upgrade.
Initially, yes, sir.
Just like
per
everything
usual.
else with the IGCs and other tools we collect and it gets paid, it's in that weird category of off the books. Thank you. So taking out a loan. Ms. Alatel.
Thank you. So to sum it up, it's like a depreciation IGC. Like it's a depreciation intergovernmental charge to the departments as they actually get brought online with whatever upgrade is happening. Is that a fair way to characterize that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. It's a little bit of a new concept. I think we often see depreciation counted in different departments' budgets, but we don't always know what's in the depreciation and if any of these master tax leases exist in those. This isn't a mechanism we're terribly familiar with, or at least me. I don't want to speak for everybody else, but it's not a mechanism I'm terribly familiar with.
So I'll just put a real fine point. I would like a table report detail of all the master lease deals, financing agreements, processes we have going on so we can understand what the nature and scale and scope of these funds are right now. Thank you. Anyone else on this? And I assume it's the same for all of these other items on the page. Yeah, so all of these items on the page are under the same vehicle. Ms. Brawley.
I have a question just generally about because I know we have licenses for a lot of different types of software. So ArcGIS, SAP is obviously with the biggest one. Is that all managed within the IT department, or are there other basically large expenses like this sitting in other departments?
It depends on the item and it depends. An example, the cost for the budget module is in OMB, so it depends.
Okay, so essentially it's possible that there's other, I know SAP is by far the largest, but there's other kind of similar ones in other departments.
If I may add, ArcGIS is an interesting case because it's not actually funded out of IT's budget. There is a separate group. I can't remember the name of the group. Geospatial Services. They manage that. They manage paying for that through IGCs to other departments. I would say that the bulk of software costs in particular come through IT. There are some things that such as cloud services, smaller applications that some of the departments have implemented with that IT support that are funded directly through the department, but probably by far the majority flow through us.
Anyone else on this? All right, I think that is what we need on IT. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Bonzoff.
May I make a clarifying?
Absolutely.
And to address
Yep.
Assemblymember Zalatel's concern that we haven't seen depreciation in the other department presentations, and that is because of the accounting treatment and back to modified and full accrual accounting. So it wasn't something that was presented last week.
Got it. Okay.
Next department that will present is the HR Department, Human Resources. The adjustments to the Human Resources Department from 23 revised to the 24 proposed include the continuation changes for labor. And then for the proposed change, there is a one-time reduction of $66,000 for vacancies.
Anyone wish to speak to this?
Well, I'll ask the Zalatel question then. I mean, what is the vacancy rate in HR?
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Volstead. I'm the Director of Employee Benefits for the municipality, and I'll be representing the Human Resources Department today. So currently, we have 5 vacancies, technically 5 vacancies. One of them is starting on Monday. So that's actually 4 vacancies. 3 of them are pending a reorg approval, which will allow us to hire a full-time recruiter in the near future.
Oh, I have a question.
Is that what you needed? Yeah. Okay, Ms. Zalatel.
Thanks. So if you are about to fill one of your vacancies and this cut went through, would you have the necessary salary to pay for that position?
I'm actually going to defer that to Marilyn. I'm not sure of the timing of when these crossed. As far as the,
Through the chair, it would depend. It would depend on the timing of the year and what other factors are involved in other vacancies and so forth.
So basically, any planned savings from that vacancy once it's filled would just move to extend the time or the deficit in other positions that remained vacant. Because if the vacancy is filled before the end of this year, it won't be a vacancy moving into next year. So that salary is, and that cost of that position is spoken for in the next year, in 24. So that means that if you still remain and keep the 66,500 number, that number would then be spread across less positions and account for less positions. It would account for 3 positions instead of 4.
If all things remain the same, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. So I see the changes that are here relate to labor. I was wondering, I guess, what is your current budget or what kind of expenses do you have related to recruiting, not just the people, but say advertising or use of a, licensing on one of those job search software platforms or something like that, or online platforms. Just wondering, do you have sufficient resources for that? And then was there contemplated an increase given the number of vacancies and given the need to really search broadly and proactively?
so we do use resources to do the recruitment aspect, NeoGov. We have existing contracts for that. So that is already included in our budget. As we continue to expand with a recruiter in the near future, we will reassess if we need to continue to expand those services that are already offered or those services that can potentially be added to our existing contracts.
So Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back a step so I can have a better understanding, it's probably to Maryland and upwards. But I'm curious I'm trying to square off that essentially operational costs are so tight that there really isn't anything to cut from operations except the amount of dollars related to the vacancies that have not been filled yet. I mean, so I'm just trying to get a sense of why all cuts seem to come through the voodoo space of betting against ourselves when there is some intentionality and rhetoric to find efficiencies. So is it the case that we have maxed out on all levels of efficiencies within operations, that they're running smoothly, so that the only savings are betting against ourselves for hiring? I'm just trying to square those two things off. Someone can answer that for me.
I didn't follow the question. Can you repeat the question, please?
The administration is, so it may not be your answer. The administration has been articulated that there was across the board cuts to be given from each director in each department. Is that yes or no?
Through the chair, the directors were given the option of a flat -2% and -4%. And what they presented to us was based on their expertise in their department. Some departments came in with a flat, some came in with a -2, and some came in with a -4. Many of those did make up for vacancies or labor budget, but it would be a department decision on a case by case.
So to be clear, flat means negative funding because the cost of doing business always is going up. Yes, is that fair to assess, especially given the conditions of the environment that we all live in? The cost of doing business just always goes up, it doesn't go down?
I'm not an economic expert, but I would agree with that point.
Right on. And so what I'm trying to get a sense of is the only place, it seems, that funding has been found to create I don't want to say the illusion, but I'll use that for right now, of actual cuts for rhetorical purposes is betting against ourselves to not hire. So my question is that because the departments are operating at the level of full capacity with respect to their current resources, but there is no more room to cut from their operation? So I'm trying to get a sense of why the only cuts seem to come from betting against ourselves to hire.
Sure. There's always room for improvement with every department operations. And there are some departments that I know of that cut some professional services. It wasn't just labor. I'm sure they'll come up in the enterprise and utilities budget, and there's some others. But in like the IT, they had some contractual services that they cut. Again, there will always be room for improvement. It appears perhaps in just in HR at this point. We can get to the other budgets later. That is vacancy, how these departments came up with the directive from the mayor.
All right. I don't like betting against ourselves, and I think that there may be more interesting ways that take time to find efficiencies that is a very popular term to utilize, but this doesn't seem that it's even getting close to getting toward that in any substantive way. And so just across the board, and I just see these 66,000 doesn't seem like a lot out of this budget overall to be cutting the future prospective hiring power of any department, right? And so, thank you.
I had myself in the queue, but I'll let you jump in, Mr. Cross. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just going to build off that. So here's how I think this kind of plays out. Okay. You have constituents putting pressure for our government to be more efficient, because it's not just government. It's not just us who are in the administration and operations that is facing the negative effects of inflation. We've got a lot from our constituents saying, hey, listen, make sure your government's running really effective because all my costs and expenses are going up as well. So the mayor is putting a directive out to the managers to, hey, show me what you can do to be more efficient. Here's a 0, 2, or 4. And then it goes back to the managers. But if you've ever run a large business, which all these are, finding those incremental spots where you can be efficient takes a lot of time. If you're running a building project, looking at where you're doing cross calculations on where you buy in your masonry, what does it look like? How many times are you going to the store, and can I get better truck or whatever? Like when you have to get those efficiencies, and they're already shorthanded. The easiest way is just the labor. A department that you already know is showing up, is not having, or that you know you're not going to be spending that money because you can't fill the positions anyway. So in light of having a shorthanded and not having, you said it's laborious, or I can't remember your term, it's very difficult to find and micromanage all those expenses to the extent that you can find enough efficiencies to come up with these significant cuts that are needed. So the easiest way when you have when you're short on staff is to identify those big gaping holes, which are labors, and move that into your budget. So I don't think it's, I think it's from just looking at it from a business standpoint, it makes sense. But then you're right that in the long term, does it put us in a negative situation in the next year or two when inevitably, if we start filling those positions, those needs still exist. And so, thank you.
Thank you. So if you look for the fiscal year, federal fiscal year ended September 30th, 3.7% was the inflation rate that we're walking into. And that's on top of 2 years of much higher, 17% total over 3 years. So 3.7% is the actual baseline for zero budget. So for sure, the answer to that question is there is a substantial reduction. But I want to talk about what this looks like, this staffing process, eliminating these positions. It looks like an emergency contract to a police vehicle company that can put in the radios because we don't have the staff and capacity at the radio shop for a fleet. That's one specific example, is an emergency last minute contract that you're the bad people for not appropriating this money today for a contractor for 3 times the cost of what we would actually pay a staff person. And this plays out in any number of domains. We even heard from the IT director, or the acting IT individual, not the director or the acting director. Sorry for those of you who are being brought here instead of the directors, because this is the hot seat. IT already told us that they will have to contract. And so baked into the assumption that there's a reduction in the budget is an assumption already expressed a number of times here that they will be contracting for those services. Those contracts are not identified. Those funds are not told to us, but they will be before us if we don't have the staff to do the work. And so there's actually a hidden expense tucked in with the proposed theoretical cut. So the hidden expense is the expense of paying for the service that must be delivered, that we get almost every meeting is an emergency. You got to do this. And if you don't do this, you're the bad guy. This knows going to happen and the assembly's to blame. You know, AWU might be a slightly different discussion that we had yesterday at the enterprise committee with their contracting for snow. They argued that they would do it anyways if they were full staffed or not. So there are some circumstances where that reality is status quo and just because of the business case, but not because of artificial cuts to labor that then generate the requirement to pay businesses and profit and margins outside of the municipality. So that's really the moving dynamic that we're seeing here. So that wasn't specific to this budget proposal. I think I've heard from Tyler some pretty innovative ideas for actually conducting recruiting and starting to turn the tide on the vacancy rates. And some of that's money driven, money and staff driven, but I wish he were here to share with us his ideas, but that can be another day. So, Ms. Zalatil.
Thank you. I'm glad we're having this discussion, and it's not really about a particular department. I think this is kind of at the crux of this budget. And I want to distinguish where I see private business is different than government. So in private business, you need to bring down your costs. And then when you make more money and you have more business, you can hire more. But when we bring down our costs in this manner, we're permanently lowering the tax cap and our primary source for getting revenue. And so we are taking a cut that we can't just backfill because we don't make revenue like private industry does. And what we then have to rely on, if we really can find some other funding sources, are often one-time funding sources. So then we can't operationalize those positions back into the budget. It becomes very piecemeal. I mean, if we're able to get a grant. And so I think there's a distinct difference between how private business and our government works because of the tax cap. Because if we take this out, if we take $1 million out, close to $1 million because of IT, or we take over across the board, $2.6 million out of this budget in the name of labor savings, that 2.6 doesn't come back. It has lowered the tax cap. And it doesn't come back next year. It doesn't come back the year after that. It can incrementally possibly come back if we have increases in population or significant increases in inflation, which we don't want. So I don't get the comparison between private industry and how we work, because we have constraints that private industry just simply don't.
Thank you. No, I agree with you. And that's why part of that system just disincentivizes efficiencies. If I'm disincentivized to lower my budget and be more efficient because I'm not going to get it back if I need it in a year or two, then I'm not going to be very efficient with it. So I think that's kind of the rub. I mean, we ask and make budget cuts, but if you want budget cuts, that means I might not get it back next year when I need it. Well, then I'm not going to offer up any budget cuts. I think there's a flaw in the mechanism, but thank you.
And I think that can be true. But what's also true is that we're hearing consistently, we need those people. It's not that we're operating in a place where efficiencies have been found. We are efficiently delivering the services. The people are satisfied, right? Consistently, we're hearing, I need more, not enough, not right, which practically the reality is it's the people of this municipality who make it the more perfect place. And so by cutting the people or the possibility of the people from doing the work, when we're already operating in a condition that is less than where it should be in a lot of domains, we aren't cutting from a place of efficiency, providing a place of efficiency. What we're doing is taking a product that's operating at, if you were going A, B, C, D, you rate it in your head where you think we're operating, and going down from there as the starting point for the conversation. And then next year, it's not because of next year, it's this year, we need it. But next year, what happens is you just have to take that incremental step down from wherever that grade is that you have now, which is for some not very high in their rating of how the muni works. Again, A, B, C, D, E, F, or A, B, C, D, F. I guess there's no E. Haven't been in school in a long time. But, that's the problem is if you believe we're operating at an A, next year, because of labor, it will be a B. If you believe we're operating at an A, I have some property to sell you. And so,
It depends on what class you're taking.
yeah. So anyhow, this is really, I think it is the heart of the question before us. So Marilyn, here you are watching us have this philosophical debate about all the things and the clock ticking. So why don't you have the floor back and let's move on to the next section.
Thank you. The next.
Yeah, and I'll just say it again. Tyler, I want to thank him for his commitment to ensuring the operation of the HR department is professional and forward-looking. I can't say more highly the difference between the beginning to now. Like, it's amazing.
The next department up is Office of Management and Budget. Same format. From revised to continuation, there are labor adjustments in line with projected CBAs. And then for the department, there is, for the proposed adjustment, there is a proposed adjustment of expected vacancies in the amount of $48,000.
Ms. Zolotow.
Thank you. Do you know what your vacancies are?
Yes.
One obvious one because you're here.
Thank you. Yes,
Prisoner.
currently we have a vacancy of a director and 2 analysts.
Thank you.
Is that out of 6 or is that in addition to the 6?
Of 6. 50%.
Man, that is tough. Thank you. So, I mean, I won't ask you this question, put you in a hard spot, but I imagine that the question is like, are you able to deliver the level of services that you feel like you should be able to deliver? And I don't want you to answer that because I know the answer. And it puts you in that hard spot. And our goal here is not to make your life miserable. It's to get through today with you. Then you can go back and help budget. But it's the same question. It's like after the staffing question is, are you delivering the services for the people that you believe you should be? Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, I'll briefly pile onto the debate as well. I think when we talk about finding efficiencies and making sure that the whole system is working better, OMB is such a critical part of that. And I think that we all experience the impacts of that on the assembly as we struggle through the budget. When we have questions about how much money we have remaining, I know that's also with the finance department. When we are trying to help the administration track and make the best use of our resources, I think this is another area where vacancies cost everybody, and it costs each of us personally, as well as it costs our staff and the other folks who work on making sure that we are tracking how much we're spending and that we're doing it wisely. So I just, again, want to put a really fine point on it, because finding efficiencies is used as code for cutting budgets. What it really should be is making systems work better. And this is an example of where vacancies make the situation worse, and why we don't want to just eliminate positions. We want to fill vacancies.
Again, I don't think there was really a question there. Mr. Martinez. Oh, was there?
No.
Okay. Thanks. Mr. Martinez.
I was just going to go back to the nature of this moment in time and the idea of betting against ourselves. It seems to me that one would start off with recognizing what the workload is, needs, and demands on any particular department from an administration perspective before you then just have a blanket kind of mandate of cutting. And so that was the question I had before, because if we are at the full capacity of each department with respect to their capacity to deliver, and I'm just breaking it down to two really layman's categories: the stuff it takes to deliver the work and the labor. So the stuff is all the things that a department does, paper clips and whatever else are the things it does and required to have. And it seems like that we're at the capacity of being able to deliver the goods or the services that we require today. And so the only place is in the labor area to find the amount of cuts that speak to a rhetorical space of the public engagement. And so I wanted to challenge that, because I feel like the better story is to be real with the public. The cost of doing business, the cost of making sure we have a vibrant community, and bringing the public along with the recognition of those costs, the amount of work it takes to do that, and the situation we're in where we're all required to be supportive of that work, versus creating a somewhat of a false narrative that there is any savings to actually find within the budget that we're looking at to provide the services that we require. So I would just say, I hope that there could be a pivot at some point of the recognition of the story that needs to be told is why we require these supports, why we require these positions, and why undermining the integrity of the public sector is not a good thing for the long-term stability of the municipality. So I just wanted to put that on the record again. I just think we're out of position to how we would even approach identifying cuts, considering that there may not be any substantive cuts to find.
Anyone else? We're on management and budget. I think you're off the hot seat mostly or halfway. For your department, yeah, those eyes, I appreciate them. Municipal attorney.
The next department is the municipal attorney. Same thing, adjustments from revised to continuation are the salaries and benefits adjustment. And then there aren't any proposed budget changes for 2024.
Okay, Ms. Zalato.
Thanks. So what are your current number of vacancies? And do you know those between the municipal attorney's office versus the prosecutor's office? Because I assume the 46 full-time positions includes both. That's my first question.
Thank you for the question. So we have, sorry, I was calculating this before I was listening. There are 3 criminal attorney 1 positions. So that's a first year prosecutor. There are 2 legal secretary positions. These are all in prosecution. There's 1 legal secretary position and these are all open positions. So I'm sort of calculating what this number is. Sorry, I should have said that. So there's 6 positions that are open between attorney 1s and secretaries. There's 1 attorney 2 position that was just filled. And so he's starting this coming up week. I know, it's great.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Sorry,
I'm not tracking with the way you're doing.
okay,
Can you
I
just give
understand.
me how many vacancies there are in prosecution's total? Municipal prosecutor's office.
So in the municipal prosecutor's office, there appears to be 7 total open positions.
Great. That is helpful. And then in the municipal attorney's office, how many open vacancies
Right,
are
okay.
there?
So we just hired someone today in civil. So
Minus
these
1.
numbers are always moving. And so that's what I'm going to just open up here just a second. Okay. So we have 2 attorney 2 positions that can be filled. Oh, sorry, I'm redoing this in the reverse. You want the number?
Just give me the overall number for
Of the
your
entire-
municipal attorney's office that you have vacant right now.
Oh,
The non-prosecutor ones.
okay, the
Yeah.
non-prosecutor, yes, thank you. So we have 2 attorney 2 positions that are open and 1 legal secretary position that is open.
So 3 positions in that one, so a
3
total of
positions.
10 in the municipal attorney's office combining the 2.
Correct.
Okay, great. Do you expect all of those to be hired by the end of the year?
I am determined to try to get these people in, and I have hired to date, I wanted to give you this number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people since I started here.
Great, that's fantastic. You've also had a number of people leave.
I did.
And so it's been an ever revolving door in the municipal attorney's office. On the salary and benefits adjustments, what's the percentage bump for the positions? Is there an across the board percentage bump in salaries? Or is this the prior approved percentage bump from last year just being implemented?
It is a combination of both, but I think primarily, in other words, everyone received a 20% increase in their salary. And so that was across the board. There were some things that needed to be sort of equalized. And we did that primarily in prosecution.
Okay. And 20% across the board in addition, so this will be 20% additional, so 20% raises starting January 1 for everyone in your office.
I'm sorry, no, this was for 2023. Those raises
Okay,
were implemented.
Great. So then what is the additional cost here? Is there an additional raise happening or is this just, what is this?
No, are you talking about the increased amount that the mayor approved?
$326,892?
So that was not something that we advocated for. I think that there was we wouldn't have done that anyway. We wouldn't have advocated for that. But I think that that is a very good move because what it will allow us to do is address increased costs, things like indigent defense that we have.
Sorry, no. I'm going to shift over to Marilyn because this is for salary and benefits adjustments.
sorry.
So
Okay.
benefits, I understand there is some increased cost, but this appears to also include salaries, and that's what I'm trying to get at. Thank you.
So thank you. So the adjustment to the municipal attorney's department for salaries and benefits is taking, it's just the standard this is the result of the standard continuation labor movement. So it takes existing positions at this year's salaries and benefits, puts them to next year for non-reps and execs, which are primarily so the CBA adjustments, the steps and the rates that are expected for next year for AMEA. And then for execs and non-reps, there was, I believe, an additional 3.3% budgeted increase to the existing salaries today for next year. So that's what that $326,000 is comprised of, including medical adjustments.
Great, thanks. That's helpful. I was trying to get the interplay of what the increase for next year is with the 20% we had authorized the year before, for this year. So that was why I had some confusion. Thank you.
I have Ms. Brawley and then Ms. Bronga.
Yeah, thank you. This is going to get to a question, but I am also concerned about the vacancies and actually more concerned about the turnover that Member Zalatel mentioned, because I know we've lost a number of, and likely, with retirements and things, we'll continue to lose very experienced people who have the institutional knowledge of the way that this city works in legal terms. And so I know as we, on the assembly side, build up our assembly council, we're looking to maintain that as well. But I just want to say that is a real concern to me. And I think it relates to salaries and the budget discussion, because we want to make sure that we're keeping people around so that we can rebuild that institutional knowledge. And I see you guys nodding, so I see you agree. But my question is, given that the salaries were increased as you described, which I think is a good thing, we need to be competitive, but we also kept losing people. I wonder if you could comment, what other reasons do you see for that? And then are there opportunities in the budget to put other funding, whether it's non-labor or whatever else it is, to keep these folks around, because it is so critical to how the city works.
Thank you so much for your question. It's a great question, and it's an opportunity to maybe get some clarity on some of this. We have actually not lost as many people as we have gained. And all of the losses that we have had in our civil department, which really have been all due to retirement or a very lengthy career with the municipality, that, the average for each of the recent departures have been like 10 years plus working for the city, and retirements and that sort of thing. So I don't know any other reason other than it was they were there for a very long time. And that it was time to move on or to do something different. But it wasn't because that I heard that it was because they were unhappy with the salary or something like that. So if that's helpful. And we will continue, and we understand this problem, and we are working very hard to make sure that we meet the needs of the attorneys and staff, legal secretaries that are there, so that we can keep them. And we understand the value of keeping historical employees. Do you want to add anything to that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, continuing on that theme, and I appreciate the clarification about that we've gained more staff. I think another consequence that we've seen of not having the capacity to meet some of these needs, and then again maybe losing some of that institutional knowledge, is that we've seen an increasing number of contracts for legal services come through. I understand there are situations where we need extremely specialized counsel, but also I wonder if you could characterize, how many more contracts do you anticipate us seeing in the next few months, and is that contemplated in this budget?
I'm very happy to answer. I'm actually thrilled about this conversation, and I encourage anyone to reach out and to get some further clarity on this. Please email me with questions. As far as your anticipation question on how can we gather or expect, what are we looking at? We do have one case that's a very old case. I won't get into too many details about it. For whatever reason, it didn't go out to RFP, or it finally went out to RFP. and it's just arrived, ready to be approved by the Assembly. That is a contract for $100,000, as I understand it, that went out to bid. That is the one that we've got. I understand there might be another one coming from the port. But the idea is, if the case, after an evaluation by our experienced attorneys that we have, maybe they're new to the department, but they're experienced attorneys, they look at it, they say, is this a case that the city can meet in terms of capacity and need? For example, sometimes the discovery in the case is very large, and we may not be able to facilitate that in the best possible way. And so that would be a reason we move. Or as highly specialized area, that would be a reason why we move. But our goal is to keep as many of these cases in-house, to bring as many experienced attorneys, and to try to meet those needs in-house to the best extent possible. But as we're building and gathering more newer attorneys and trying to get people on board, there is a period of time where we might need to get some help on the backside to make that a reality.
And I'll just note, in terms of efficiencies, I think that's another great opportunity to say that above your department's functioning, the fewer lawsuits we enter, the better, because that is a way to, again, protect our budget. So that is not a comment on the Department of Law. That is a general statement that we should be avoiding those as much as possible.
Yeah, but I have Ms. Bronca first.
So Mrs. Brawley answered my question, but I wanted to just applaud you for the 10 hires in the year. That's a pretty big accomplishment, and clarifying that the retirements and long service were part of the issue of losing people. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Cross.
Thank you. Yeah, the municipal attorneys at the prosecutor's office has been a big concern of mine, because I remember previously we had that they only filled, I think it was 10 or 11 positions out of 16. And I imagine as a workload comes in, you have to prioritize those more egregious crimes with those that are more of an inconvenience or more of a nuisance. In what you can only handle so much on your plate. I think they were saying over 400 cases to 450 a piece. A workload increase about 42% if you did the numbers. And I guess, and Anna asked a lot of the questions that I was getting at. And I think it's so critical that the public and everybody recognizes that, those lower crimes that may either not just get prosecuted because of a lack of staff and stuff, those are also usually the most visual ones, the nuisance things on the street, vandalism or whatever that is. It doesn't involve bodily harm. It doesn't involve assaults or anything. But as they prioritize those things just fall off. That's part of the problem that we see. So I just want to make sure, again, we're doing everything we can to support the prosecutor's office, and because 42% vacancies is significant. And then I'm just kind of curious, obviously your budget didn't adjust for you have vacancies, but all the other departments I noticed when they had to come up with their 0, 2, or 4 said, hey, listen, we do these one-time adjustments, but there's no one-time adjustments in legal, even though we know that they're missing a significant number of people. So is our intention to keep that money on there so that we can offer hiring bonuses and things like that, and so that we have a slew of extra funds to incentivize if we find really good attorneys that are willing to come to work with us? Or I'm just kind of curious why your department, even though we know there's a significant number of vacancies, hasn't adjusted that into the budget like all the others have. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Again, this is not a change that I advocated for, although I agree with what you're saying, that we need, we don't have a law school in Alaska. So we have to be a little bit more creative about trying to market ourselves. I learned just a few days ago, when we just hired somebody today who's a wonderful candidate out of Washington State, that we may be able to offer some reasonable relocation situation with a commitment, which a lot of other places do, the public defender's office and other agencies. And so those are the types of things that I'm evaluating. And though that little extra room would be helpful in entering into those types of agreements. As your prosecution developments, I've established the leadership in prosecution and in civil And that's a big deal. When I got here, that had not been established. And so we are building a team, and we're being collaborative, and we're working very hard. We're working with the Alaska court system. We're working with the police department. We're trying to take care of those problem areas that have traditionally just kind of been dismissed or declined because of the huge backload that has plagued the entire city, and particularly the prosecution department. So we're working really hard, and I'm very proud of the accomplishments that we've made to date in such a short period of time.
All right, I have Ms. Zalatel, then Mr. Martinez.
Thanks. So I was looking at the contractual line item for your budget, and it was 2023 revised was 1.797 million. How much of that is your Indigenous Defense contract? Because I know that's a big one.
Thank you for asking. The Indigent Defense Council, and just for the members that aren't familiar, we have a duty to provide defense to indigent defendants in the criminal cases. And so that's our expense. And that monthly bill is right now $106,000 a month. So that eats up quite a bit of that 1.7 million in contractual. The other problem we have, which I've addressed with the court system, is that when our Indigent Defense Council has a conflict in a case, we have to hire an additional law firm, sometimes at $2,500 at a minimum, to represent that conflict case, right? To be the attorney in the conflict case. And this gets complicated for everybody but I'm happy to explain it further. The point is, we are getting that under control. The court is now alerted that these conflict cases are getting to be very high, much higher than any other years. And so they are now starting to tell our defenders, hey, is there really a need for a conflict counsel in this case? Can we just proceed? Can we evaluate this conflict to see if it really requires a change in attorneys? And so we're making these seemingly little, but they will reduce the overall cost of this.
So I'm looking for a total though. So your Denali Law Group, I think is who it is for both conflict counsel and indigent defense. What's the annual contract cost?
I don't have that
Because
number right in
what
front
I'm
of me.
trying to dig down into is if this is 1.797 million, how much of that is taken up by that contract, right? And do we anticipate any increases going into 2024? Because this is flat funded from this year. Plus, we know we've issued a number of civil representation contracts in 2023. I'm curious what the remaining room is for any civil contracts needed in 2024. So we can take it offline and you can provide me those numbers. I just want to make sure as we're contemplating, because we've had an increase to the Denali Law Group contract come up kind of unexpected before, and that creates a pinch for us. So I really want to just be mindful about that. Thank you.
I think Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just go and echo a little bit of what Mr. Cross was identifying before as well. And first to say thank you to our municipal attorney, Helzer, and to betting on your success. I mean, fundamentally, what we've heard now, and I'm squaring this off again, similar to what Mr. Cross was trying to land, is that I haven't heard any department say that the situations of their workload have changed so drastically that they don't need any people. Everyone said the workload is as high as it's ever been, if not more complex, because the world is more complex and people are recruiting and they want to fill those positions. So we've heard that. You're in a unique space, and I hope it's not because we have expectations of more lawsuits, so we have to bulk up in that space. But I'm just on the face of what we're discussing today. Your workload to be able to fulfill your duty and deliver the services as you described across the different units that you oversee, you're betting on your ability to do that work by hiring and being creative with recruitment and retention. So in fact, the dollars that we're looking at that other departments are being compelled to some degree to create savings in the budget, you're utilizing those to, in fact, bet on yourself as a department to hire, to attract, to retain the workforce needed to do fulfilling the duty. And I think that's really important for the public to recognize. And I go back to something that Member Zaltel talked about before, the difference between private business and the public sector. Everyone we're talking about today that is a municipal employee is a public servant. And all of the departments from the municipality are delivering, fulfilling their duties to deliver the services that are required, oftentimes in code, but definitely in the expectations of the taxpayer and the public, that the municipality is fully functioning, fully staffed, and is doing their job. So I appreciate that your narrative today speaks into that space that has created some degree of questioning today with respect to the way that's landed on other departments. So thank you.
And just to quickly respond, I think it's a great place to work. And I think it's a great place for a new attorney or an experienced attorney to come into and be have some real solid input on government and advising officials and helping with major issues like homelessness and being a meaningful player. And I think that's the best sell for this job. So.
I think you're right. And I would ask that we can get a TikTok of that if you recorded it, if you say it again, and let's get that out there. That may be good social media feed as well. But thank you. I appreciate the optimism.
So I know about 5 minutes ago, Mr. Salt Joyce is in the room. It's all here. Anyone else on this topic? Nope. I think we're good. Oh, wait, there's the alcohol tax. That's right.
Continuing on with the municipal attorney department is the alcohol tax funding that supports some program operations from the municipal attorney. The change from 23 to 24 is just the continuation costing for salaries and benefits.
Go ahead, Ms. Alto.
Thanks. That's a DV prosecutor, right? Doesn't that fund a prosecutor in your office?
Yes, that's correct. Well, that's a good question. I will have to get back to you. There's a couple of APD officers in our office. I will have to get back to you on that. I'm almost certain it is prosecution though, because it's first responders. So
Okay,
it would not be
yeah,
civil. Sorry.
it would be good to
Yeah.
maybe add a little bit more descriptor in the line item budget just as to what it's funding. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So are we still, I doubt we are, I haven't heard about it in so long, operating the program with the state? Because you mentioned the 2 police officers, and there was a time when we authorized the use of 2 police officers who were kind of on a joint effort with the state prosecutor. So they would take on more DV cases if we would provide more investigative capability through the police. Is that still ongoing?
That still is ongoing. I haven't checked recently into the success of that program or
Okay.
how it's going, but I
It
can
might
do
be
that.
the 2 police officers. I don't know, but that's the only time I remember APD being directly involved with the Department of Law. Okay, thank you.
So I think this is 2 different, municipal.
It appears the police are funded in the police department budget, not. Okay, you want to speak to that?
Sure. So pulling up my handy alcohol tax cheat sheet, it says municipal attorney program operations recurring and then police program operations recurring. And I think those are complementary to the DV piece because then MIT for police is a separate line item. So I think those are 2 separate things.
I can certainly get some clarity for you on that.
Sure, thanks. All right, Marilyn.
Thank you. Continuing on to the next department. The next department is the mayor's office. Same thing with changes from revised to continuation are just the salaries, the continuation salaries and benefits adjustments. And then for the mayor's office, he's proposing a $100,000 reduction to non-labor.
let Mr. Berg get settled, there are a couple questions. I think Mr. Volland is first. I'm going to queue a while waiting for this. Then Ms. Zalatel, Mr. Volland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions. Number one, on the salaries and benefits adjustment, which positions?
Through the chair to Member Volland, I think this is a continuation budget for labor purposes. So the position I think was added between 2022 and 2023
Got it.
from 9 to 10, and I think it's maintained at 10 for
Okay.
2024.
Okay, I have more questions. That makes sense. I think I just read that wrong. I will just say a statement that I find it interesting. There's no savings due to vacant positions in the mayor's proposed operating budget. So are there any vacancies in the office of the mayor?
Through the chair, Member Volland, not at this time.
And then how many special assistant positions are there in the mayor's office?
Through the chair to Member Volland, I'm going to make sure I get this right. But I think there's 4 special assistants, there's 1 executive assistant, there's a director, a PIO, director of communications, there's a digital communication specialist that works under her, and then there's a director of constituent relations and community engagement. If you look at the PCNs, that I'm not sure there's a differentiation, but that's, I think, how they're classified in the budget document.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you. I have some questions about the contractual line item in your budget. I see a reduction of 10.94%, and I believe that I don't know where the cost savings comes from, but what I'm concerned about is we still have considerable ARPA administration to work through at least 2025, and I know that's being handled through the mayor's office. So could you talk about whether or not there's anything anticipated here to handle that, or will we be seeing you all bring something forward to include in the mayor's budget to continue monitoring the ARPA grantees, or do you have another plan?
Through the chair to Member Zalatel, thank you for bringing that up. Currently, we are doing our last scrape to see if there is ARPA funds available internally. As you know, that was something that was also done by the administration regarding the NAV Center and then the cold weather sheltering. Ms. Espy, who has been administering the contract, was out, but she wanted to have a longer discussion. Unfortunately, I couldn't have it with her today, but that was specifically what the discussion piece was about. I can't say what that answer will be because I don't know it, but I will come back to you with that, Member Zalatel.
Okay, you're working on a time clock, November 21st.
We have purchasing has been very attentive to making sure we are hitting the timeline.
The other question then is, where does the 10.94% cut in your contractual come from? You have a reduction from $945,500 down to $842,000, and from 2023 revised to 2024 proposed, and I'm uncertain where the backouts are for that reduction.
Through the chair to Member Zalatel, I believe it's non-labor. It's not necessarily contractual.
It's on the contractual / other services line, so maybe it's non-labor reductions, but I guess if you can look into it and get back to me, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I have myself, I think you'd ask exactly the same question. What are the specific cuts into the non-labor costs, which is about $103,450, which is in the contract line in the budget, but may or may not be. Mr. Cross, you're next.
Thank you. Mr. Byrd, perhaps you can help me. I should have taken my ginkgo biloba this morning because I'm trying to rack my memory. Seems like 4 months ago, I'm trying to remember the assembly. There was some contentious between the administration and the assembly. Didn't we cut a position? There was, was it funding? Can you refresh my memory? Because I just remember this. I just remember there was a position in there, but hey, you shouldn't be messing with our personnel budget. And I'm just wondering how that's reflected in here. Does anybody remember what I'm referring to?
Yep, it was at first quarter, and we ended up, Mr. Byrd and I found a different fund source for that, and so it never happened. You're welcome.
Okay, let's move on.
Thank you. Next department is the Equity and Justice Department. The changes from revised to continuation include the salaries and benefits adjustments, and then also a one-time reduction due to a settlement not carrying forward to 24. And there are no proposed changes for 2024 for the Equity and Justice Department.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is as folks are aware, not surprising, an office that I am very much interested in supporting. So, Ms. Bonzoff, am I reading right in the budget that this particular department is funded primarily through IGCs?
It does allocate out, yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. That's looks like its primary sources of funding for itself is through IGCs. So a few questions just based off of the language here in the budget. So I guess I'll ask these questions to Junior, our Chief Equity Officer. So in the budget, it describes a variety of diversity, equity, and inclusion training given to different departments. And I believe, just scrolling through to find the exact number here, apologies, it's in here somewhere. There we go. So it talks about how there were, in 2022, a variety of different sessions that happened with 1,700 individuals attending these sessions. Can you just confirm if any training for diversity, equity, and inclusion has happened in 2023?
Yes.
Okay. And could you give me any details of how many sessions you have had in 2023?
I can provide that number, but majority of those individuals are within the community members. Some of those are some workforce development. Some of those are for current things that are happening in the community. And I work with different group leaders, whether it be with the MOA or nonprofit or educational systems.
Yeah, thanks. If you can share just a little bit about after a little bit about the trainings that you are having, and then can you share the whatever materials that you're using in those trainings? If you could share those as well, I'd be interested in looking at that. Then just going back here to the language and the budget. So the budget details equity and justice data and outcomes. Can you just speak a little bit to some of that equity and justice data described in the budget that's being collected?
Yes, some of the data that we collect, I mentioned it many times when it came to the mic, some of it is the workforce. And some of it is where we get people involved with some of the events that we host here at the mayor's office, whether that's educational or whether it's being part of the MOA. And that's through educational with the school district, and that's also with organizations outside of the MOA and also within the MOA. One of the projects that I'm working on now is with Eklutna. We're going to be doing a heritage program where we educate individuals about Eklutna, the successes, the good and bads. This will be meeting-wide, and that's a project that I've been meeting with Eklutna leaders, Eklutna Inc., and really just trying to educate individuals about different cultures, especially with Eklutna.
Thanks. If you're able to share any of that data with the assembly, which I know is a request that's been made a couple times, that would be helpful. Because again, just going back to the budget that the mayor has proposed, and I'll just read from it. It talks about establishing baseline equity data targets / benchmarks in collaboration with partners and establish goals and initiatives to make progress and to track outcomes. And so for myself, I am very much interested in what those outcomes are. And I can't find the exact language right now, but it also talks about, bridging the gap. And so it's, hard for us as policymakers to really get a sense of what those outcomes are and what bridges are being gapped if we don't have access to that information and that data. So yeah, if you could share that, that would be particularly helpful to me. I'll go ahead and leave it at that, and I might get back in the queue.
Ms. Alto.
Thank you. So I don't know how much of the budget work sessions you've listened to. They're riveting, but we have had a lot of conversations around vacancy rates and the substantial vacancies that exist in the municipality. What is your role in helping to fill those vacancies so that the municipal workforce is as representative of our community as possible?
Well, I just heard one of the departments have a 20% increase. I think that'd be great with everybody. I just want to get that off. But I work with Tyler within HR in finding ways to kind of bridge that gap, like Felix mentioned, where we get part of the workforce, incentives for employees to be able to be here, recruitment efforts. I'm pretty sure the majority of you know about the academies that are happening with the school district. That's where we work hand in hand with the school district to get the MOA part of it. And I've been taking part of that with Superintendent Jared Bryant. We went to Tennessee to kind of see that their model that they have been bringing back here to cater towards what the municipality of Anchorage looks like. And so with the workforce, with the individuals learning about the MOA here, it gives them an opportunity not only to stay here in the city, but also have a life here in Anchorage. Me growing up here in Anchorage, a lot of individuals encouraged me to get out of the state because of opportunities. And that's what I'm looking to change here in Anchorage by getting involved with the school district, getting involved with nonprofits, getting involved with our partners, SBA, to be able to create the environment for individuals to be able to stay here and bridge that gap.
Thank you. It'll be my intention at the beginning of the year to really start checking in on where we're at with our efforts for recruitment and retention around vacancies. And I think the check-in with you will be how is that going and how representative are our recruitment efforts being? So just a heads up, because what I want to do ahead of first quarter budget revisions is see if we need to bring any other resources to bear on the issue of bringing our municipal workforce back up to staffing levels and making sure we're doing it in a mindful way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, because I think that's definitely something that needs to be recognized here in the city with my efforts to be able to work with HR. We've been in Mountain View, we've been in Fairview, we've been in Midtown, now we've just came off of J-Bear to be able to recruit individuals in all areas. And we look to continue that work. So thank you.
Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to highlight, go back to what Mr. Rivera was talking about. And I'm particularly interested in the funding and the collection of baseline equity data. But it seems to me that, and I've offered this to all the departments, it seems that there's a workflow misorganization. So for example, what's the data that you're utilizing or your department utilizes or has collected to drive the actions that you described today?
Yeah, and I mentioned this many times. When I first came in office, I held a listening session, not only myself, but also in the OEO office, where we partner in a lot of community engagements, which you believe that's a big part. And I think that still is a big part, to be able to get community involvement, engagement, so that we can get their voices. So we understand what are the different disparities that are happening in the workforce, but also in the community, and how can the municipality help with the resources that we have, not only locally, but also outside of the municipality.
And where does that data live today?
In my office.
I believe the assembly has articulated, I think you mentioned, there was one public meeting I recall not so long ago where you were at the assembly chambers with us and said you would provide the data of some of what you're talking about. I don't believe we've seen it yet. So, because it's interesting, because I wanted to make sure that when we fund things and we're paying for stuff, I also want to make sure that the taxpayers are getting the deliverables, but also we have to make the cases for what we're doing, right? And we have to be able to justify the expenditures. We have to also be able to talk about how the actions we've taken have made a dent at all, and what dent we're talking about. And so I would offer that I really require, in my mind, a clear plan of data collection, both in terms of qualitative and quantitative, so that as policymakers, we understand when someone says, here's an initiative that I think is important for the municipality. That sounds like an opinion. If it's backed up by the data, we're doing this initiative, bridging the gap, because we know that this percentage of X, Y, and Z, so there's some meat to the why actions are being taken. I think that's really important. And I think the responsibility is specifically important to you and your office, not only for the deliverable today, but there are many in our community who don't see the value in the Office of Equity and Justice. They see the value in the celebration of diversity, but not the systemic change that this office offers us the opportunity to drive into. So I would offer not only to do the job that is the departmental services as identified in this budget, but it also is the opportunity to educate the public on the systemic challenges so that as policymakers, we know how to come alongside and move those things. So I would love to see a report soon. We could help you identify ways to data collect, but I've only heard kind of things that you have talked to people about as baseline of the actions that you're taking. And I'd love a little more concrete data.
I appreciate that, George. And thank you for meeting with me with the listening session that I had. It allowed me to see that there was a disparity within the boards and commission and look at the percentages. And that's where I work with the mayor's office to look at those percentages. We looked at those and I started increasing our efforts to meet with community.
What are they? What are those? Just so I can land a plane, one plane for me.
I'd love to provide that for you. I ain't got the numbers.
All right. I would encourage that any department, and this is for all the administration, any department that has an anecdotal story really has to be able to back it up with concrete data. I just would encourage that because, yeah, I was there and I'm still waiting for a report. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I think Mr. Vera has to be back in the queue. Mr. Vera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I noticed that I think it was in 2021. Let me just go back to it. No, just last year, 2023, there was an increase in the travel budget. And that travel budget is sustained in the 2024 proposed. Can you just tell me, is that yourself traveling to like any conferences where you're learning about what other jurisdictions are doing with regard to equity and analysis and that kind of stuff? Or can you tell me just how that travel budget is used?
Yeah, that's both myself and also the OEO director, Erica, who's been doing a great job so far. She's actually be leaving pretty soon to another conference. But yes, those are the travel costs that for us to further our knowledge in this field.
Got it. Yeah, I would like to know which opportunities that you have been taking advantage of with regard to those conferences, because as you know, I like to attend those similar kinds of conferences as well. And so, yeah, that would be great.
Awesome.
I think that is it from me, Mr. Chair.
Better make sure there's money in the travel budget. Because you said you want to travel to some of those conferences.
Yeah, put some money in
That's what I just
put
heard
some
you
money in,
say.
brother.
I just heard you say you know where the conferences are because you may want to go to them. That's what I said. Is you probably want to
put
have
some
money
money,
in the
man. Let's get it.
budget for travel, Mr. Rivera. So, okay, anyone else? I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next department that will be presented is the Equal Rights Commission. Same activities, or pardon me, same actions on the budget from revised to continuation are only the salaries and benefits adjustments. And then there are no proposed changes to this budget.
Ms. Bonzoff, do you happen to know if they have any vacancies?
I believe they may, but I do not know their numbers. We can get back to you. when
Yeah,
we
that's
respond
fine,
to
and I can
questions.
reach out, but I just, they're not here.
We
Thanks.
will provide that information.
All right, anyone else on this one? No. Okay.
Thank you. Continuing on. The next department that will be presented is the Internal Audit Department.
It's getting serious.
There is
Somebody go tell
the
them.
standard continuation salaries and benefits adjustments, and there are no proposed changes.
Any questions on this one? There's the standard question anyone going to ask? Mr. Rivera?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll ask the Zalatel question, and then I do have an additional question. Are there any vacancies in your department?
Through the chair, Member Rivera, I'm here for the same reason why Marilyn is here. So yes, we do have one vacancy, that is our director position.
Great. Thank you for that. So I guess one of the questions that I often ask of this department, because we ask a lot of all of our departments, but we do especially ask a lot of your departments. It's almost every month someone has an idea for a new audit that they want to do, and that all mostly falls onto you and your folks. Does your department, and this may be difficult to respond to, but I would like an honest answer, please. Does your department need more support to get the work done? Because I know at least in the last couple of years, we've had to take audits off of your plan because you don't have enough staff to get all the audits that we imagine and the administration imagines.
Through the chair, Member Rivera, that is correct. I mean, we can always use another auditor. I mean, for example, I can go to little detail. Our budget is about 99% labor and 1% non-labor, and we only have 4 auditors. So in order to make the 1% cut, we might have to give up one position. That's about 25% to 33% of our audit output. So yes, any more budget for hiring additional auditor, that would help.
Thank you.
Yeah, we definitely ask a lot from the audit department, and everyone just assumes we can just audit that, and it is definitely a labor issue. So thank you, Ms. Bonzoff.
Thank you. Moving on to the next department is the Assembly. Going back to,
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Bongo.
I'll be really quick. I wasn't looking in the binder when the Equal Rights Commission was up, and it's the 24 to 23 change in salaries and benefits is 5.85%. And you weren't sure if they were down or up, and I just wonder if this then represents raises? I'm back on Equal Rights Commission because I didn't catch that one.
okay, so if I may, the only change for the Equal Rights Commission is the continuation salaries and benefits adjustment. So it would include taking the positions that are budgeted this year, estimating their costs for next year. So if they're, I think Equal Rights Commission may be execs and non-reps. And so whatever salaries are at their execs, if whatever salaries they're at this year budgeted, then they'll be budgeted at 3%. If they're non-reps or AMEA, we would adjust for their steps, expected steps for next year, and the CBA's scheduled rates of pay for those steps. And then also included in that salaries and benefits line would be adjustments for medical and any other adjustments.
Thank you.
All right, Assembly, Desiree. Party time.
So the next department up is the Assembly.
So I'm just going to interrupt there and say it's an ongoing conversation. And I know this is just a vestige of the process, but the Assembly is not a department. The Assembly is a branch of the government. And within the branch of the government, there are effectively 3 departments: the clerk, legal, and ombudsman. And so just so anybody who's listening, the assembly is not a department of this municipality or this administration. So just for clarity's sake, Marilyn, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, for the clarification. The changes from revised to continuation are the same types as we discussed in the overall overview. The one-time adjustments are about $800,000 reversed. And then there is a debt service increase, and that's just that GASB 87 adjustment from non-labor to debt service. And so the continuing change is the salaries and benefits adjustments. And there are no proposed budget, mayor's proposed budget changes.
Desiree, Ms. Altel.
So Ms. Camacho, does this budget here reflect what the assembly requested? And if not, can you talk to us about where we may be expecting some other costs or how it may change?
So the assembly didn't submit a formal budget request to the mayor because past history has shown that our submittals were never acknowledged. And so the past couple of iterations of the budget process, we've just been doing amendments directly. So I expect for next year, there will be a couple of amendments that I can think of, like staff for the STR and the clerk's office, maybe some increases for contracts, potentially legal, potentially around elections, stuff for the runoff election might be needed, but we don't have an exact number on that yet. Those are just off the top of my head things for next year.
Thank you. And I know we've had some conversation about the technology in chambers. Is that another cost we'll see now, or is that something that's because of the process it has to go through that'll be kicked down the road to possibly first quarter?
I am hoping that we'll have some sort of an estimate or idea of what changes will be needed for the video center. We actually have a meeting with John Crabb and some IT folks in a couple of weeks, right before the budget. So I hope to have a last minute proposal for the video center, but I currently have no idea what it might be.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Put a little bit of detail on that skeleton for the members so you understand what that is. John Crabb has provided the recording services for us through the fire department for a long, long time. And as does happen with all great lines in the sand, he's retiring. And we have an opportunity and really a requirement to figure out a new way to manage our meeting records. Our technology, the cameras we use are the best technology of the 1990s. And the way that we stream and the way that we capture information needs to be better. And we have to come up with a solution really in the next year to transform the way we record and archive our meetings. And so what you heard Ms. Alatel referring to is a solicitation, an internal conversation with the IT department at this time that wasn't listed on the special projects with the budget, but it really is going to live within our branch to modernize that entire system and prepare it for the next 20 years. And so that's a substantive project that will be coming forward to you shortly. Go ahead, Ms. Alto.
So this question is actually for our legislative services, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on the record, which is, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, Marilyn, I apologize, but I don't want to forget it. We have about $300,000 in alcohol tax, and it's really around educating the public and following up with the public. Maybe at our next rules committee meeting, we can get an update, and if that seems like a reasonable amount moving forward. So, and Ms. Camacho, if you have something to add to that, yes.
So we've got two contracts, as you stated. One is for education and outreach and the other strategic planning. The strategic planning contract was awarded mid-year, and we expect it to continue to about April or May of next year. The total contract amount was about $195,000. So we'll still need some amount of an appropriation for that to carry on into next year. And I believe it's at your discretion whether you want to continue with the education and outreach portion for next year.
I misspoke earlier when I said we have 3 departments. There's a 4th, and that is, so it's clerk, legal, ombuds, and the legislative services office. So, Ms. Bradley.
Yeah, thank you. And this is not a specific question, but I think it's really important to highlight in terms of efficiencies and really the work that we're able to do within our own branch. I think it's important for newer members, which I know I'm one of them, but to acknowledge how much institution building there has been in the last couple of years because of direct staff investments in this not in this department, but in the work that we do. So just so folks know, we don't have full-time staff as all 12 of us are aware, and don't have the capacity for that because that's not the way that this branch has been built historically. But what we have invested in over the last couple of years, thanks to the work of some folks who are still on the body and those who left already, our legislative liaison, and I'm not going to get all the titles right, but our communications person who's really transformed our ability to communicate with the public more proactively, as well as now our policy analyst who's able to help support some of that research that in other branch or other levels of government is done by legislative staff. So I just want to recognize that to quote a friend of mine, we're punching above our weight in terms of the number of staff that we have. And then, of course, the work that we all do collectively and the great work of our staff in the clerk's office and the ombudsman and the other folks who support our work, our assembly council. So, and I acknowledge this isn't a question, but I think it's really important to emphasize how much work gets done with so few people in our branch and that there's not a lot of room the way that our budget is currently built to expand on that. But I also want to emphasize too, a lot of the one-time funding that is being reversed and rightly so in most cases, because it is a one-time project, is things like the housing summit, is being able to engage with more partners and produce more communications and really do a lot of the work to help solve the city's problems. So again, I acknowledge this isn't a question, but I think it is really important just to highlight and how new a lot of that is. And to Mr. Constant's point about thinking ahead to the next 20 years, this is a great investment that we've made. And it's a pretty good investment for the money I think that the municipality is getting. So just to say, I am thankful that we are maintaining our staffing level and hopefully in future years we can grow it.
Imagine how dangerous you'll be if you have full-time staff. So anyone else? No one asked the operating question, the fundamental question that everyone's getting asked. So we should ask it of ourselves.
Go ahead.
We have 1 vacancy out of 36 positions in elections.
It's stuck in HR.
Oh, no, it's not.
That's a separate one. Okay.
I
so-
think we got
okay.
that fixed.
Oh,
Yes,
great,
that was
good.
fixed.
So we have 1 open vacancy. Okay.
Working hard. So, okay, thank you. I just had to make sure that fair is fair. So next. Oh, thank goodness. How long do you think we'll need? 20 minutes? 10 minutes?
Up to you,
15?
honestly.
So, yeah, let's come back at 5 till.